Tene ta jeje shawala number ye ta tanda lamchir number ye bena ne ta tangbo gadu lamchir ti jesu ta tanda chitang san gadu mambo yungu yore la ti ga mane peche to la gadu lamdo chirwa gadu te jong jungre de yinaya tel ti mane ba di mane pa zangda ya mazi rang su su ki nyam dang to pa tingen zan la penpe zhu sun ru ki tap jay dang di yendo nipa di nasa lam da chirwa re la tini nasa sinkin di rang yin nga tang nga rang su yuli cha ra ka pumbo ye pa la tini yung yo re la di yung kap su la nasa ka nar tini di ka lu duk ngal di ka san la jo hi je tende che na tene tige ta te dungal ge ranging tong san jo ge namba ta re la tene te ge mane ba tige mane ba chang de ma ji te nyamling ge tho sun ro na sa te nyamling da nyam do tene na sa te la tene nyamling compel ton ro ge ta la na sa lam do cherwa ta te ji su nyam ba lam do cherwa nye momba sinkin te tang ngaran soge chitang tudang namba jondo ta thoma meba ne kamba bajag onke te nye momba namba natsoba jege yo rela jipa te la teni sen la dungal lu la medewa rangi nika la nepa la sobe nrevu nyamba tende yungi yo rela ta te la kare gogi yo re sena nrevu te nyamba te minjungo tab Dreva ngamba te minjungwe maatsi paage Nyamomba chipa te yapolondoya. Nyamomba chipa la tene ngaransu nyamne yapolondoya te la nyamomba lamda chirwa tamware la ta ti namba som te hubare. Nyamomba lamda chirwa tamwa te la chitanga ta tanda ngaransu tanda nyamomba hedang, nyamomba serna, nyamomba timu, nyamomba desha, nyamomba chakdo, nyamomba ngajarde, nyamomba namba chusumare. Ta ti khonsu mato bakahi yore. Ti khonsu mato bakari yore sena sana johi. Kapkala sen jowa nyamba unju ya pandabota. Tene ta te yendo kapkala tene sana njapa. Namba natsoba unju ya pandabota. Kapkala sana njito namba natsoba unju ya pandabota. Tende yore. Te ngaranso namba sanji bichu gongda sena nyemomba tisom te nyemomba mare. Ta ti chohe te la tene ngaranga sana dunga yunga yore sena dunga yunga yore mato yena nepa yunga yore mare la. Te yendo njepa yina ya te tardo ta ngaranga sana dunga yunga yore te yina ya te la tene yena nepa la soba jachimbo yunga yore mare la. Te yendo njito yina ya te tardo re la. Ti chelna ti nyemomba khonsu to yo mare. Nyemomba khonsu to yo mare ti ina ya rang la dungal tang jitra tong cho hi yung ki yo re la. Te la yang penpe tab kandi si gu gare se na ta tindre gin jitra che na yang ra, cho hi che na yang ra, kantar yang tini ta te rombab chingon to le di yo na tini jitra tenzo rang yin ki yal dro ju yo patang. Jo he tenzo rang yin ki yal dro ju yo patang. Tini jepa te yang tini rang yin ki hito mene pandabo rang yin ki yal dro ju yo pa yung ki yo re la ta ti go ni nyemomba lamda chewe tangwa te tembare. Ta yiba te pardo lamda chewe tangwa.
There are the 4 different subsequent applications, the 4 different things that we need to take to the path. And the first of these is taking joy and sorrow to the path. And so we have many different joys and sorrows that arise, that happen. But although they happen, we need to make sure that they don't harm us. So they will happen, but we need to make sure that they do not hurt us in any way. But not only do we need to make sure that they do not harm us, but we can use them as a way to develop, to increase our experience and realization, to increase our samadhi meditation. And so this is the teaching on taking the joy and sorrow to the path. The second of the applications is taking illness to the path. And taking illness to the path is that because we have this physical body, the physical body is going to get sick. So we're going to get sick, but when we do get sick, if we are just completely suffering from that, if we are overwhelmed by that, then that brings us pain and discomfort in our body. And so when we have that sort of pain and discomfort in the body, that is something that we need to make sure that we can't actually be harmed with. But not only is it the question of making sure that we aren't harmed by the physical pain, but this illness is something that, again, can become a companion. It can become a helper to our practice. And so when we take illness to the path, then it is a way that we can develop our practice, increase our practice. And so this is the practice of taking illness to the path. And then we also talked about taking the afflictions to the path, taking the disturbing emotions to the path. And the afflictions are going to happen. They come out of the power of our habitual tendencies, and because they come out, various different afflictions can arise for us. And so when they do arise for us, then they create pain in our minds. They create suffering in our minds. But not only that, they can also create discomfort in our bodies, and they lead us to do things that harm ourselves and others. And this will bring us bad results. And so we need ways to make sure that we do not suffer the bad results that come of this. And so when the afflictions happen, we need a way to see that actually this is good, and that we can take these afflictions and use them in a way that is going to benefit our practice. And so this is taking the afflictions to the path. And so these are the three types of applications which we have discussed. Now, in the instructions on taking the afflictions to the path, we have discussed how to deal with hatred or anger, how to deal with stinginess, how to deal with delusion, desire, jealousy, and pride. We have talked about these 6 different disturbing emotions, and there are some emotions that are not included within these. These are things like when we get depressed, when we feel depression or discouraged in our mind. Or sometimes we can feel regret. We can have various different regrets that happen. Or we might have some sort of fears or even fears and terrors that come up for us. Now, when the Buddha taught the afflictions, he did not teach that these are afflictions. They are emotions, but they're not disturbing emotions, or they're not the afflictions. And so there are they happen. These are feelings and emotions that happen for us, and they do create discomfort. They create pain within our minds, but they don't generally lead us to harm other people. They do not generally create that that pain for others. For example, with regret, we can feel regret. And then when we look at that, that'll make us uncomfortable in our minds, but that regret does not bring harm to anyone else. And it's the same with fear. Fear is something that happens, and it is uncomfortable in our minds, but it does not cause us to harm other people. And so for that reason, they are not considered afflictions. They're not considered what we call the disturbing emotions. However, they are experiences of discomfort, unpleasant experiences, painful experiences that we have. And so we need something to help us during that time. So whether we have a depression that occurs, whether we feel discouraged about anything, whether we experience fear about something, whatever that happens, we need a way to deal with it. And that way is to rest naturally. Rest in the natural state, rest loosely and look at the nature of that. And when you do that, then if you are feeling fear and you can look at the essence of the fear, then the fear will disappear. Or if you are feeling depression, then that depression will disappear and it will not harm you. Or the same thing with regret. You can feel regret, and then when you look at the essence of the regret and you see that it cannot be established as anything, then there's no way that it can hurt you. It's as if it can just disappear. And so these are the instructions on taking the afflictions to the path. So we can use these instructions with the fear, regret, and depression also. And so this is so that is the instructions on that. And then the fourth application is taking the bardo to the path.
Tene tateya bardo sena tangaranso tanchiwa chiwa yungu yowarela chiwa senke de kandeji yungu yoware sena tene tatanda jitanga ngaranso ludan semni yowarela tene ludan semni de tan relba yoware lu semni ta je tunong nambanda bojela harge yowarela ta jiding no je harne jiding no de harde bekabla 다티 루셈니데 탄로 요라라 루셈니데 탄로 갑슬라 단치와 레라 디갑슬라 루던 센니 탄로 요라 마도 셈데 젠치야 요마레 셈게 살차 망가 파데 다 니마 딱와 찍바 인고 요라 Teni chewe kapsala takarang, che yung kapsala ya, teni ngara ngal ni chewa ndapa mahimba. Hipa te korang rangin ka ngamu chewa ngamu ki jen la teni yung yore. Ta chewa nga tsi chunga te yang, nuwa te xar yung kapsala, nuwa te ta tanda tsendi ki nuwa te xar. Teni ta tiki chewe kapsala, tsendi nuwa te pa yalni. Teni rinpi ki jewa chima nungwa ti xara yung yore la. Ta tiki tsendi nungwa ti ya yal, jewa chima nungwa ti yung ma xara bhartina la. Teni ki bhartatina la. Teni bhardo segi yore la. Bhardo sedi te la. Teni ta te yang perna nga ranzo television ki channel rabu chi na. 다 되게 너는 양자르도 샤르송 양자르도 샤르송 채널 당보 니바 다 된데 샤르송 선바 요아레데 얘는 은에 많이 봐 채널 당보데 네네 제 샤르데도 대파 거니 대파 코랑그 메싱글 롱도 파드니 티니야 니바데 추샤르 니바데 파르도니 숨바데 추샤르 다 된데 진짜 주도 제파 샤르 근데 용기요. 티 바르달라요. 티 동차요. 다티 동차 때라 바르도세요. 나란 좀 센디게 노한다 보지. 나티 동차 때라 바르도세요. 라. 되네 다 tel라 바르도티 다 텔레비전 코라 채널 지우 값을 갈치와 가요 말이지. 이나 나란 좀 바르도게 되네 티게 센디 노하다. jewa chima nuwa nyi di je yung partatana pe kalchewa yuwa kalchewi junsen de kandere se na ti kaptana la tene njitra ikira je ma hirwa tene te yendu nye mompa la sopa yung ikira je ma hirwa konjambu yapu salbu che chong na tene jewa jima di yapu che len to pandabu jewa jima di nuwa di yapu che shar to pandabu 다 디게 바르타티 야부 마중와지 다티 바르탈라 지라도 동한 망보지 드니 텔 초로와 마데와지 다 드니 녀몬바 헤당라소 바 망보지 턱나 드니 디게 지와치마테야지 상이 승연라보지 드니 디게 지와티 야불레 마도바 저기 와라 지와치마테 드니 디게 단다 다나 딜 멤버십 발라 다티 노아테 샤르마도 바인두 텔 바르도 테페 칼치와요 바르도 테 칼치와 인두 텔 바르도 텔 칸데 자자 제고레세나 드니 단다니 야포 송노 야포지 땅 톱나 드니 치웨 갑트나라 드니 야포지 송노 레바 드니 바르도라 치웨 가살라 셈바 레바 야포 용기 와라 tini tanda tandika tinala somlo tsani matangwa chi tagasi yoyana tini ti shiwate loburtu lepe kap tinala tini njitra chi dungal chi semba cho kashila hedang chi tini che tesi che ngambanrabu yungi yore la tini tigi cherna tanda ni pardolam chirte gongu yore.
When we talk about the bardo is a Tibetan word that means the period in between, the intermediate state it's sometimes called, if you translate it. So the bardo, it's easier to say, so I'll say that. The bardo is something that is going to happen. We are going to die. And when we die, what is it that's going to happen? Well, right now we have a body and we have a mind. And the body and the mind are connected. The body and the mind are connected, and then the confused appearances of this life arise. So we have all the appearances of this world that do happen. But at some point, the body and the mind are going to separate, and that point is the point of death. And so the point of death is when the body and the mind separate. But at that point, the body and the mind separate, but that doesn't mean that the mind just stops. That's not how it is. The clear part of the mind is unceasing. And it's the same every day. Every day we have this clear part of the mind, and that doesn't stop. So at the time of death, it's the same. The clear part of mind is the same. And so when the And so at that point, right now we have before we die, we have the appearances of this life that arise, and then eventually when we die, then the appearances of this life will cease and they'll change, and then we'll see different appearances. So right now we've taken birth, we have the appearances that happen, and we have the appearances of this life. But when we die, at the time that we die, the appearances of this life will just disappear. And then the appearances of the next birth will gradually begin to happen. But in the period in between those two, there is what we call the bardo. So the bardo, it's like, if we take an example, if you have a television and you're flipping channels on the television, you go from, one channel is showing, and then you sort of flip the channel, you go from channel 1, and then you don't like that, and you go to channel 2, and then you go to channel 3, and channel 4, and so forth. And so it seems to us like you just go straight from one channel to another, to another, to another. But what really happens is, if you look at it, is that when you're on channel 1 and you're looking at channel 1, and then you don't like it, so you flip the channel, the appearance the picture on the screen ceases and momentarily collects back in on itself, and then it reappears as the next channel. And so then you get the second channel showing, and then you don't like that either, so you flip that. And you and then there's again that appearance collects into itself and stops for a second, and then the next channel appears. And so you've got this little gap in between each of these different channels. And so one condenses down, and then the next one appears, and one condenses down, and that condenses down, the next one appears. And so in between each of these, there's this little empty bit. And this little empty bit is what we call the bardo. And so the appearances of this life, when they end, then there's an empty bit. And that empty bit is the bardo. Now, if we're thinking about this, of course, thinking about TV channels is not at all important. But the bardo actually is important. When the when these appearances stop, and there's the empty bit, the period in between when we are exchanging them for the appearances of the new life, that is a very important point. And the reason that it is such an important point is that at that time, it is important that we are not overcome by fear. It is important that we are not overcome by the afflictions, the disturbing emotions, and at that point, if we are not, but rather if we are able to have good mind states, if we are able to have a good state of mind, not have any fear, and have very clear mind, then that is something that will be extremely helpful for us. It'll be helpful for us in our next life. And when we take our next life, the appearances of the next life will be good appearances. However, if during the bardo period, if during that point we have a lot of fear, and we have a lot of maybe hatred or disturbances happen, these will disturb our mind, and then the appearances of the next life will be really how should I say it? There's a wonderful Tibetan word. I'm going to tell you the Tibetan word. You get a vocabulary lesson. This vocabulary lesson is sangi singi. So sangi singi is like it's really all over the place. Like these really things happening all over the place. So all sorts of things will, and usually not very good. So very disturbing appearances in the next life will happen. And so, and this is what will happen in your next life. And this will be hard to deal with. And so we need to make sure that doesn't happen to us. We need to be able to have control over ourselves during the bardo. It is very important to do that. And so the way we do that is that the way that we can take care of that, to be careful about the bardo, is that it's from now that we need to think about the bardo. We need to think about it. We need to think about it in a way so that when we come up to the time of death, we can die well. so that we can be loose and relaxed when we die, so that our minds can be loose and relaxed at the time of death, and so that during the bardo our minds can also be loose and relaxed. And the time to train in that is now. We shouldn't think to ourselves, it's nothing. We're not going to worry about that. Put it aside. And if we do that, and then it comes to the time of, I'm going to die. And then all of a sudden you die, and there's all this fear and all this suffering that is going to happen. And then you get really depressed and upset, and you feel anger or hatred. And then there are all sorts of bad conditions that will then happen in the bardo. And so for that reason, it is very important now to take the bardo as the path.
Tene ta te yang kam dana la sona nawa ta minrin zumu nembe che dawe sersam char dawe sersam rangchar rangro to chwa te tain do se ta te la ta tene nawa te yang zumu ga ko tene mekin debu te zumu ne che ta tende nangi ware la tene ti kapsula tangarang la tanda katit na kapsula tene kongke tebon ni ge me ni de ne de je ne tene tanda karise kinzu parmate de dige nawani de ka ne tende se nang ne korang tende nang ne teni ta cherang la kare hyargre se na tangbo kaya hyag mare napo da bundo meglong ancho la kaya kog mare la teni kale sen lepo se megeta megeting on ta nawe ting on ni na meglong la teni we mandawa mambo hyargre te yep mandawa khado mandawa kapkala marbondawa kapkala jangondawa kapkala ngambondawa tende mambo hyargre la nawe nondo yo te ni na lepo si ni na urdandawa dirdandawa tene ta tende dogre te kare se na chuni je ronda se na ta te chegi yul kanya yo mare te nang tene ranghin ke ta te yungi yo la ta tel kare gugre se na ti tain do rombap so yo che tene tel san lepo se ti ngola tene wege na yo wege ngola tene nyambar yo dala na yo dai ngola tene tingon de le na tene ranghin ke tene tomba imba date yo tomba ronda imba wete yo tomba ronda imba la ranghin ke zidin da bo tondong da bo chungdong da bo tende yongre se tende sungun do la tene te da bo je yebe te da bo yo re la tene te rombap sulle che chino parson kondong meje wete ya chino parson kando yo mare la date chino parson kondo yo mare tong sing zujin la yin kambarse se ta te tende je la kamgu yo re so.
The way we practice taking the bardo state as path is when you press your fingers on your ears or on your eyes, sounds naturally resound and colors and lights naturally manifest, rest naturally for a long time. So when you press, so what happened at this time when Khenpo Gangshar, let's see. So what you do is you press your fingers into your ear to block your ears, or you press your eyelids to cover your eyes like this. Press them lightly like that. And if you do that, then you will see and hear things. When I was receiving these instructions from Khenpo Gangshar, then he took his two thumbs, and he placed them over my eyes and pressed lightly on my eyes. And then he took his middle fingers and he closed my ear holes with those. And so what happened at that time? Well, what happened at that time is that at first it was just blackness. I couldn't see anything with my eyes. I couldn't hear anything. And he said, "Do you see anything?" And I said, I don't see anything yet. But then gradually, as I let my mind relax there and looked with my eyes and listened with my ears, gradually I saw various different lights appear, and I heard various different, there were various different colors, various different shapes. Some of them were red, sometimes they were green, sometimes they were blue. There are many different lights that I saw. And when I listened to what is hearing in my ears, let my mind relax there, then there is like this roaring and roaring, growly sound there. And so, what are these lights and what are these sounds? These are the own light, or the self light of the Dharma nature. These are the natural light of the Dharma nature and the natural sound of the Dharma nature. And so at this time, you're not looking at any external object. You're not listening to the external object of any sound, but just naturally this sound happens. And so at that point, when that happens, what is it that you need to do? Rest naturally for a long time. Just rest naturally. And let your mind be relaxed and look at the nature of that. And so you rest within looking at the nature of the lights. You rest listening to the nature of the sound, and naturally, and you see that they are naturally empty. You see that the sound is naturally empty. You see that the lights are naturally empty. And when you see that these lights and sounds are naturally empty, then they are less overwhelming, and they're less terrifying, or they're less terrible looking, and so they become a little bit less. And so this is what it says, and this is actually how it is. So rest naturally for a long time and grow accustomed to the appearance of the utterly empty forms that don't exist anywhere, neither outside, inside, nor in between. And so when you look and you see the lights are not anywhere outside, yet neither are they anywhere inside, nor are they anywhere in between the two of them. And so then we need to rest naturally for a long time here and grow accustomed to this. So we need to meditate upon these.
Tene ta tela ya ta tanda chitang ming ge on sena da emchi ge on sena tene tanda ngus zum ne na te simela ne ge on da la tene ancho la yon te tardo se du tela ngus yinji minji zum ge zergu ba yo mare karire sena so de te si tambo sena so ni de yaso maso ni de tambo damna mai de hyu chimbo zomna teni di we de yongre la dra de yong yo re yinji minji la ba tena nyap gu bu ngi ba yo mare we de yong yo re la dra de yong yo re ta di ge no la kambar se na teni kam dar so na chiwe che ya de le yin me be tan chiwe ge kap so la ta di ge we de ta dra de tu ge yo re teni ta kap ka la dra de tu ge yo re kap ka la teni we de char ge yo re la de charwa te junsen kare re se na me ge ombu ge le ka de ngan ro na umbu ge le ka de ngan ro ge yo re la ti ka la na umbu yo mare la teni me ge umbu yo mare la teni zon thon ya me du teni ti ge tombo na kun mona nda bo ta teni ti ji so we nda bo ta ti chuni je rong we ta chuni je rong da tin su yong ge yo re teni ta ti charwe ge ka sa la rang la kam cha yo na teni ti rong wap che ta ndo yo na teni trol ge yo ta ti je ti ne ge yo mare la teni kam cha me na ta nguma ni thong ma nyun ti teni te ji ter ji tra che ta kan ri ri song sam ba da ten zo la yo tra we ten zo la chuni tong ba rong we ten zo la yo tra chuni tong ba rong da ten zo la yo tra ta ten de yong ge yo re la teni teacher na kam dar kam na nan ri je me dong che ba wam ma pong to punju ba ta bo rong nong dong wo hi te tro lo se ten ngarang ge no re ngarang la rang yin gi chuni tong ba rong da yong ge yo re chuni tong ba rong we yong ge yo re telen ji tra che ko yo ma re samne teni semba le de yo chuni je ngong do nyam ba yo na teni ti we ti an serwa yo ma re la teni ti da ti an ne pa ka yo ma re la junsi teacher na tanda muni teni inchi michi zugu matsar na yapu yuanda zugu matsar na teni te so dam na te zinwa te hyar gre so te hiu che zang dam na mei te hiu che zang na we te yung gre la da te yung gre yuare.
Now, some doctors have told me that if you press your eyes in this way, it is possible actually that you can damage your eyes. And similarly, if you stop up your eardrums too much, you can also damage your ears. And so it's important not to do that. But this doesn't mean that you can't do the practice, because actually if you clench your teeth really, really hard, and if you scrunch your eyes closed, then these lights and these sounds will happen anyway. It's not necessary you don't necessarily have to take your hands and press your eyeballs and block your eardrums with these way, because you can hurt yourself that way, and that's not necessary. You can just clench your teeth and just scrunch up your eyes, and then you will be able to, and then it'll work. And it is important to do this and to see these and to get used to these appearances that happen. As it reads here, since at the time of death there is nothing other than this, you will recognize these sounds, colors, and lights as your self-display and be liberated, just like meeting a person you already know or a child leaping onto its mother's lap. And so here at the time of death there are, there will be these lights. We will hear the sounds. We will hear the sounds, or these lights will happen. And what is the reason that these are going to happen? The reason is that at this point the eye faculty has ceased. So the eye faculty has ceased, the ear faculty has ceased, and so we don't have the faculties, the physical faculties anymore. And so at very first we will just be in like blackness. But then gradually these lights will happen, and these lights that happen are the natural light of the Dharma nature. They're the natural sound. It's the natural sound of the Dharma nature, and if we are used to them, if we have grown used to them, then we can rest naturally, loosely in them, and they won't harm us in any way. They'll appear to us, and we'll just rest, and that'll be okay. But if we have not gotten used to them, then there'll be all these strange lights and all these strange sounds, and we'll get afraid. And what will happen in our mind at that time? We'll see there will be these sounds. There will be the natural sound of the Dharma nature, the natural light of the Dharma nature, and we'll experience all sorts of fear at that time. And so, but if we can look at the essence of these appearances, if we can realize that this is the sound, the natural sound of the Dharma nature, then we don't have any fear, and then we can rest naturally, rest evenly and loosely within this, and then it will not be able to harm us in any ways. And so that is why we do this practice of taking the bardo to the path. And so, as the doctors say, don't press your eyeballs and don't close your ears too hard, but just clench your jaws and just scrunch up your eyes, and it'll work fine.
Tene ta tena lundup tegalje nongcha nyongselembe nyentrik tang ta tela mentrik ni yebale mentrik ton ni jikdo papa tene tela chitang ge zopa chimbo gambe kapsala zopa chimbo la tanda tene kada ton tekche sun tanda tegal ge nongcha tegal dan tekche dan tegal si yore la ta ti tegal ge nongcha la nyamsel ba ti kapsula tini nimu we la tawa ta semo member to gamba ti ta number ni yore la ti na ni member no to gamba mensam ta parchir ni che to papa yin tanda ti nengo jikbare ta pardu we ta ser la ta ge yore 대다 찍바래라 되네 자체성 다 대코라 책 많이운다고 망보요래 마도 제버려 말해 대견동 알아서 되네 다 둥코르가 값서 조두기 냠린세 베가서라요 되네 년티 담문티 난게요래라 대다 파시 찍바요래 대레 예 니몬 천음지 세르다 되네 세모 다웨 돈 로덴지 세르라텐데 다티게 니마 샤르가 돈 누브가 세모 다웨 돈 로그라서 발람데 체르소중 예토세 다테야 다그네 강구근도 소나 라메맹아 라테네 강구그라마도 테칼라테나야 대지 대본다보다 바치 당쟁이 운주여 바쟁지 레라 드니 대단다 단다 라메맹어 동 때니 냥슬링 그 바제레 다티게 바르돌람도 제르게 담아 두바티 다티게 외다 세르다 데라 다다 외라 타니 다티 람도 cherchul kandi go gresena machulube mondo nyambriga patgarare
So here, this teaching on taking the bardo as the path corresponds to the key point of darkness instruction among the daylight instructions and dark night instructions for practicing the manifest aspect of the tugal of spontaneous presence. So here, this is the same as the darkness instructions. So there are the instructions, called the darkness instructions and the daylight instructions from the practices of Dzogchen. And when we talk about the practices of Dzogchen, there's the practice of kadak, or spontaneous purity, spontaneous purity that they say? Spontaneous purity. And then there's also the practices of the sudden leap, or the tugal. Tugal means a sudden leap. And so there are these two different types of practices. And in the practices of the tugal, or the sudden leap, there are practices of looking at the sun, looking at sunlight, or practicing in the darkness. And of these two different types of practice, the practice here is the same as these darkness practices, the practice of looking at darkness, practicing at night, looking at the darkness. So these are the same thing. It is also the same as doing a dark retreat. It is essentially the same thing. When you do these, then you look at the various different lights and things that arise. And so here, the essence of the practice is the same. There's just a distinction in terms of how many different instructions there are to follow, but otherwise, the essence of the practice is really the same. Similarly, when we do the 6 yogas of Naropa, there are also not the 6 yogas of Naropa, the 6 applications in the completion phase of Kala Chakra. When we do the 6 applications, then there also are daylight and darkness practices here, and so the practices here are the same. The practices of the darkness of this practice and the darkness practices from the 6 applications of Kala Chakra are really the same, and so. There are also the systems of practice based on the rising and setting suns at daytime and on the moonlight, electric light, and lamps at nighttime. And so there are also practices in looking at lights, looking at the moonlight, looking at electric lamps, looking at various different types of lamps. And if you want to do any of these types of practices, then you should get instruction from a Lama and meditate according to the following the instructions of your Lama. If you just go ahead and do it straight off without any instructions, then it will not be very comfortable, and there will be many difficulties and problems that will happen. So if you practice them, you should practice them by following your Lama's instructions. And so here, this is the brief these are the brief instructions on taking the Bardo the path. So Bardo as the path. And so these are brief instructions, and they're brief instructions on the lights and the sounds that happen. And then when the lights and the sounds happen, we need to look at them. And then when we look at the light, what is it that we do? It's just that we rest loosely and not altering it. We rest loosely and evenly, not altering it. It's just that.
Tene ta teji so ni lamdu chirwa la ta ta ni lamdu chirwa te ta pardo lam chirchi to nda ko je imbe cherna ni lamdu chirwa la ni lamdu chirwa te melam tujuru su semji tsolwa la metu par ta chitang ni mo song ta tenen semo melam mandawa mi tenen melam te ngohi melam yimba hi tenen melam la on journey kapkal melam jur melam dubo yin yapo la jur tenen ta tende melam tulba mambo je ta tende nang tenen mengo yore la ta ti chitang ki yore te yinaya 단디 값은 이 람도 제외 맹어들라 생지 졸와라 대답을 못해 bar 되니 다디 제기요 말에 단다 지당 그나야 요래 되나야 돼 다다 낭낭기요 말에 단다 디 맹어들 말에 단다 이 람도 제외 맹어들 간들에서나 당보 냐리용 값다나라 마이 롱밥 정원도 니 괴체 되니 딩원라 니니 딩아나 녀이소나 랭가 물럼메베 닌투도 송데 드니 닌투부제 세마인바 야녀이 세마타도용 롱밥제된도 레네 예나 투부웨서 세와인 다텔 닌투고웨서 세그레 물럼 상에승에 가야 메바텐데 요나 양갑레 니 이에 메용와 상데 레네르 두바 양갑갈라 니 히라 마구바 Sam Lenen Dubai Yungi Yore Yuni do Sonde Mlam Sansin Mijong Tsini Semata the Temba Mapper Ji Son Mlam Top and Gozamba in Te Mlam Te Simini Sam Te Simaimba Dabundo Tene Mlam Te Siminaya Tene Mlam Tenzo Hajang Trapondabu Mappa Tene Jona Mlam Top and Gozamba in Te Tene ta tiga onki ni lamdu chirwe kabla onbo tong zemba rabla mulam ji denga pa nrengla ngo xie denga pa tamala mulam zombo shata mi denga par sang ta tinde ndamanda yungi ware
Following that come the instructions on taking sleep as the path, and the instructions on taking sleep and as the path are they're like a companion to taking the bardo as the path. They're a helper to taking the bardo the path. And so it reads, without depending upon mental efforts such as emanations or transformations during the dream state. So there are a lot of instructions on what to do during dreams, a lot of practices for dreams. And when you dream, so you spend all day working and you've got and you're thinking all day long, and then you go to sleep, and then there are all sorts of dreams that happen. And then, wait a minute, I think I got that wrong. You spend all day thinking. And then in the evening you go to sleep, and then when you go to sleep you recognize the dreams. I'm going to clarify this actually. Tambo de menga shinda na ro de ningang samno tang de sama nie
ni malam ngohi malam jor malam turbasi
de samno tang de namjinge ani jitembe samno tang dan da ba
samno tang dan do ri
on da ba
tegara
okay jitembe
malam ngohi basi
mix de ningung ka so mix ke nyam mai ba ro
ri
last okay. I actually was right, but it's good I checked. So you do all these. So during the day, you have all these different sorts of thoughts that happen, and then when you go to sleep at night, you go to sleep and you recognize this the dream. You realize, oh, this is a dream, and then sometimes you're even able to do things like transform your dreams, transform your dreams, and like you take a bad dream and you transform it into good dream, or ways to recognize your confusion in your dream. So there are all sorts of different instructions on doing dreams. So there are many different instructions about dream yogas and so forth, but here, they aren't given here. The instructions on there are many different feelings you can have in your mind, but those are not these instructions. This is not that instruction. Well, then what is this instruction? This instruction is that sleep in a state of undistracted naturalness. And so you just sleep in that state, rest naturally in that. And if you can sleep within that without being distracted, then it is very clear, very crisp, clear thing. And sometimes it'll happen that you don't sleep. During that time, you may sleep into a deep sleep devoid of dreams. As soon as you as soon as you awake, you are vividly clear in the natural state. This is called the luminosity of deep sleep. And so you sleep, and you are vividly clear when you wake up. You may have things that happen in your mind, but they don't distract you. You're very loose and relaxed then, and there's no disturbances or upset at all during your sleep. There's none of the sangi-singi that I was mentioned before during your sleep. And sometimes it happens that you don't sleep at all. It may happen that sleep doesn't occur at all. Instead, you remain awake and vividly clear, or you fall asleep. And so you might not sleep at all. But if you do fall asleep, but through various dreams, though various dreams take place, they are forgotten the moment you wake up the next morning with nothing to remember. This is the beginning of having purified dreams. And so here you have dreams, but you aren't distracted. You are not distracted during your night. So you may have some dreams, but they aren't very solid. They aren't very hard. And so that is the sign that they are beginning to purified. And so it is said, for the person of highest capacity and diligence, that dreams cease by being forgotten. For the intermediate person, they cease by being recognized. For the person of lesser capacity, they cease through the experience of excellent dreams. And so there are these various different experiences that you can have.
Thar malam thog gupana, thar malam te yampo tsangman raboje gupana doji tenju tamji hyal tai nos. Te yon hyal lam po rinpane yen le to parchao. Tam po mengo yore de na yang kamdar masonga ta kamdar semni lenji jiten de rongyin ki nyambri ga patera. Rang mengo de sungare. De yen che tukong ga zawan durdu ba zomo. Lar nepa seji jarwa yung je gombental sani judi sani zawe thay ta sanji sedan jeba tamji je gomba. Tene sarma ta nimi judi tamji je sani zawe thay. Mengo sabgui nimbo jen sangde mengo sabsi tamji churchong ni nyungu ngo kin dordu zamdo ke tene nyungu je ke pa yen. Chorji tipi dulwar kawe tse chormi thukji tenpa nyong song yen teni tati pe ngaran so tuji ki jeba mambo seba te yapo manjong tse na chormi thukji tenpa nyong song yen tuji ongin dadan lan juk na nyam su long de gongchuk me pi chu nyam su long dewa yo re korsa tong norsa hiro yo ma re 대처 구바 토만통에 지부 담방가 이끌어와 나 데브주르 체크트바 만롱바 고데 고라 니데 마추 루바로 테네 고라와 테네 니 데와 테네 팔키 인다보 테네 데브주르 체크님 본다보 마이바 테네 헤진 케미 공샤르 온부티.
So the fact that dreaming must be purified in the end is commonly agreed upon in all the sutras, tantras, and treatises. And so we will need to purify our dreams, and this is talked about in all the sutras and tantras and treatises. And so the additional points about the practice of POA should be learned from other sources. So what this means is that there are many instructions on the practice of POA. but they are not given here. You need to learn them from other places. Here it is just resting evenly within the co-emergent mind, and that itself is the instruction that we're given here. And so here, these instructions are merely a condensation of the basic points of the instructions. So it's sort of like a digest, putting them all together in the basic points. And so then it reads, from the core of realization of all the victorious ones and their sons, the root advice of the profound points of the new and old tantras. So this is the intended meaning that is taught by the Buddhas and their sons, or their children, you could also say, the bodhisattvas. And it is the root advice of the profound points from the new and old tantras. So from the new tradition and from the ancient tradition, it's the profound advice of profound points from those traditions. And so I have extracted the fresh essence of the profound oral instructions. I've taken like the real pith, the important things, and written them down concisely in a few words. And so it's just this very brief, short instruction. It is taught in these times when it is difficult to tame beings through the vehicles of effort that the teachings of effortless mind will appear. And so there are a lot of teachings that you have to do things and alter things and work, but they don't always. You can't always do them. And so at this point, so at those times, you need these that are just effortless instructions. The instructions of the teachings of the effortless mind will appear. And by the power of times, if you practice these points, if you actually do this and put it into practice, they are a teaching that is easy to apply and devoid of error. So you can't go wrong. You can't go off in the wrong way in some way. And so at a time when I saw many reasons and was also requested by several eminent people, setting aside elaborate poetry and lengthy expressions, so this is written in a very easy way to understand, a way that is simple, words that are simple, that are meant to be easily understood in a very common, ordinary language, not in some high language that's not with with all these flowery, eloquent expressions. This was written by Gangshar Wangpo, a Khenpo from Shechen, naturally and freely in a way that is pleasant to hear and easy to understand. And so this is going to be nice to hear, easy to listen to, easy to understand, and this is the type of instructions there.
They giving Tali Jino, Tassin Tonji, Flaming Kalon, you let them jerte, Sabdan Himbu Zue Tom Barne, Zodin Sarbegatan, Chajur Jay, Tenitanda, Be Tanda Yankala Sobaton, Namdong and Balaso Batamjile, Jalne, Teni, Tati, Sabdan Chetawa Yendo, To, Tenin Jitin Jakontonji, Deji no Denver Hughes on Menon Jazere, Tati, Tiki Trubare.
By the virtue of this may an infinite number of beings, that is all sentient beings, be victorious in the battle with the demigods of platitude. May they shine with the majestic brilliance of the essence of profound meaning, and there may there be a celebration of a new golden age. And so this is a time when there will be difficulties, problems, and strife, and dangers, and we will have encounter a lot of bad thoughts. But if we realize the meaning of this, may we realize the meaning of this, and may this bring great happiness to the entire world. And so that completes the instructions. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Rinpoche. Rinpoche, I've been wondering about this section on taking sleep onto the path, because as you suggest, it's a little different than it is in other instructions that we may have studied. And particularly, what I'm perplexed about is that the notion of beginning to purify dreams is when we wake up in the morning and we have completely forgotten our dreams. Because I always... the other instructions have led me to believe that the highest accomplishment is when we actually recognize our dreams. And here that's just that's for the intermediate person. So it just I just, I'm having a hard time reconciling this with the kind of way I've been led to believe from other instructions.
Nilam de kirete, nilam lam kirete, tes go kabudu. Kaisana de menga shenda mindrao des.
Ori.
Oh, tene dila de kapsula ne rapna tene kawayana. Ombudsumba rap la milam jete gapadang. Sumbara. Tene de jete gapa yana de menga tene dabe kausa de jedro yana de menga shina de be kaka de kaisen menga shinda na tene milam ngoshepa de rap drabo sumre.
Ori.
Tene dela ne baba drabo shabare. De menga de so tene shira tungimendo se.
다 대소수 공바 소소 말이 단다 물람데 두주르라 소바도 물람 오히바 다 된저 되게 졸와 난게 물람 냠린 값을 같은데 난게 와라 근데 간데르세나 많이 로밥 정도 다 때라 착바던 켐바메 바 물람 지데 가반다고 다 된데 물람 티 지미나야 때라 차긴다고 가야 메바 살찬다고 가야 메바 돈이 그건도 바 yar도한다고 다 된데 number day zalt den arva tini ta jai lam ten sola kaka na pensare
This is because different presentations each have their own particular intent that they're talking about. So they each have their own particular intent, and so in other in other instructions, there are practices for transforming dreams, for recognizing dreams, and practice here. But here, these are not the instructions that are given. Here, the main instruction is to rest loosely and naturally relaxed in sleep, and through that not have a lot of attachment or clinging to the dreams. And so the main thing here is not to cling to the dreams. The dreams may happen, but you don't cling to them in any way. And so then the clarity of the dream then just dissolves into the empty aspect, and it's within that you rest. And so here they're just teaching these different types of instructions. They're teaching the paths in different ways.
Thank you, Rinpoche. So in our discussion group, we were talking about doing these instructions. And one thing we just wanted to make sure that these instructions are for sort of all situations, not just formal meditation, like on the cushion. It's like if we are downtown and in all different situations. And then secondly, so going through the different, say with the afflictions, so we're supposed to recognize it and then relax in naturalness, and then within that look at the disturbing emotion. Just I'm using that as an example. But some people, as we were talking, were thinking, well, maybe they couldn't, maybe their relaxing in naturalness was really mostly shamatha. And so, we'd recognize, say, the anger and be relaxing in what may not be the true nature, maybe only kind of a mixture or mostly shamatha. Is there any benefit in that? And then looking at the anger?
Did a consulgi discussion group nana? De la dutchene de menga de so de duda number jundu de pujatang tangara de mixegi nyamsha kapsuma de namjindu penane pa ne dong dane chinyoka dona de kapsun menga de nyamsalango nas ya mixegi pena ane nimon lam kyer kapsu de chitan de nimon de nguzin ne de na la rambap su shakgo de nimon ge ngola ta yore mikashege de ngone de semgi ngo rambap su shaba de ngone chetu bumendu se de ngone rambap su shaba ma yempa de Shinema to Che Togumdus, the Ngudzin in the Hluna, the Ramba Sushapa, and Shine, the Dread Double Drosona, Yana de Shine Kampayana, de la Pempagayana.
Hini Jangba ina, Kassin, Tanda Tinang Yorba, Tanda Nyemomba, La Gent de Gona, Neka Gonan, Gonan, Zawa Meshepa, Duru Don, Jitin be something Tabu, Tati, Hine Zong, Neka Gonan, the Inaya, the Zawa Hiro Chegamare, Teni Tig, Nelu Muma, the Tatupna, Teni Tig, me, Tatanda. Dundan shepa nangin tene tati la tanda nyemon lamda chewa mare tanda di hine gomba di nyemon lamda chewa mare korang te sima goi ka bara hiwal ne ka bara
Tene Tampo de Dudan number Jundumenga Tiso.
Dudan number Jundula, Tanguni Salad Day, Gomdin Ten Day, Tende Maina, Toko to Jundo, Tenhipoe, Goni, Tingo de Jong Tupna, the Yamamba Lover to Jung Gabla, Tingo de Jong Tupna Yapamari. Inji Mijin Dogu, then to Jundo today. The Jang at Tetakora Mangok, named the Winsare.
When you are looking at this and you're actually just sitting in shamatha, when you're just sitting in tranquility and that's all it is, then it is as said in the instructions. If you view the affliction as being a problem and you try to stop it, then you can just, all you can do is temporarily suppress the emotion, but you cannot actually uproot it, and it will eventually reemerge. It's like the mundane jhana states that will eventually happen. And so if you so that it doesn't actually uproot all of the disturbing emotions. However, if you are able to look at at its nature, then, as it is said, you can take the poisonous plant and you can make it in. You can take the poison and extract the poison from the poisonous plant and make it into a medicine. And so that is what the actual taking the afflictions to the path. So when you end up just resting in shamatha, then you are not actually doing taking the afflictions to the path. And then, as far as your first question about sitting, whether you should do it in all times or just sitting, this is not just a practice when you sit and when you get out your cushions and sit on top of the cushions. That's not all it is. But at all times, you should try to remember your mindfulness and awareness, and through that, sustain the essence. And so here. Then if you do that at the times when the afflictions might suddenly arise, then at that point, if you can maintain the essence and maintain the practice, that is very good. It is not necessary that you just be sitting on your cushion. This is actually a very important point in the instructions.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you for your generosity and precious instructions. I had a question about what is the relationship between the meditative practice of a kusulu and the subsequent application of recognizing the essence of illness and disturbing emotions. And in addition to that, I was wondering, is it, in terms of the recognition, is it a recognition of the essence of illness and joy and sorrow and the disturbing emotions themselves? Or is the recognition and the resting in naturalness of the one who experiences illness, the one who experiences the disturbing emotions, the one who experiences, or if not the one who does it, that which experiences joy and sorrow?
I want to clarify. when you're saying recognition, are you? Because I was using recognition in a couple of ways in the translating. There is the recognizing the joy or sorrow when it arises, and there's also recognizing the natural state. Which of these are you talking about?
The recognizing the natural state.
Okay,
Is it of the phenomenon itself, or is it of the? Yeah.
I got it. Thanks.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that. Tamboda Rinpoche kache de la ne tujiche shu ne de la kusula jolgon da ne je lam kyer de nigi dawaga mixegi ne sem de singing ngo de ngo shene de karesugo na de singing ngo de ngo shene ro de la ne na natsa de ngo la ta ne nimonge ngo la ta na de ngo shebe kaso de la tagra de ning tsora rangi ani ngo la taguna siana tsora gi nyongkengi ngo la taguna de sabo jongse
sarva jongso sorwa rang ngo la dana te ji pare ki sorwa rang ngo la dana yung de de la sorwa nyongking ngo la dana yung de yo de la tini chitang tanda kusula jogom ta tanda ta nasat lamchir la soba gomden chi parva gomsul chi pare de na ta ti nyembo tentang go ne lam de chetsul de ji mi yunda bo de kakara ba.
It doesn't matter whether you look at the essence of the feeling or the essence of the person experiencing the feeling, because it's the same. So that doesn't really matter. It's okay to look at the essence of the illness or the feeling, or it's okay to look at the essence of the person or of whoever it is that's experiencing it. Now, when we're talking about the placement meditation of the kusulu and taking illness or taking joy and sorrow to the path, then the meaning or what you are meditating upon is, and the way you're meditating is more or less the same, but they're different in that when you're practicing when you're practicing the taking things to the path, then the way that you're using it as an antidote is different. And so the aim of these two different types of things is different, but the practice is the same.
Okay, thank you, Rinpoche.
Rinpoche, this question comes from our discussion group a couple of days ago. So, if we've been contemplating the logics on emptiness, and we've done the looking for the location of mind or self, then we're resting in the natural state as Khenpo Gangshar has described. Is it likely that we may have glimpses of emptiness of self, or is this extremely rare? And while still resting in this state, is there a danger of confusing some other meditative experience as emptiness of self?
Could you clarify what you mean by emptiness of self? I'm sorry, I want to be able to make sure that I can translate it clearly to Rinpoche.
Well, I'm thinking Rantong.
Oh.
Emptiness.
Konsongi discussion group nala chitan tambo tene tsamgi gone tene ane tombani gi dona tena pap ne tene semgi ngola ta na de dj so ane semgi ngola rambap su ane hlo na tene de mixege de kasula ne rantong gi den de ane tonju yunas de tongna data ne mixe meda nekap gi nyam dan true gi nyanka yunas
동보 간디세 동보
tambo tusam gomne tusam chene tene ane semgi ngola ta te kabo yuna ta dj so tene nelu na ne hlo na rambak so hlo na ane de randongi den de rangdong de tongi nas de morangi rangdong de Rantong Gitawagi, Tomini Jabo, Liares, Dinedida, Negap Ginyam Trujina,
Nikap nyam.
Nyam Togin, Niginan, Nyam Jabo.
다 된도 코랑게 생기 내루고 된도 레나 롱동도 연동 기버기도 요 말이. 뭐 기반도 샘 코랑게 된도 되니 디게 롱동 쫑바 똥바 똥쫑다 보여 요 말이라 살와 쫑바 요 말이 살통 송주 그 초로와 디 다디 롱동 따와 때나 바바디 똥이 임바 템베기 제다 연동 따와 때나 바바디 살차예 바 템베기 제도라 디 투성 그 때니 되는 감비념 뉴스에는 야보래봐. telling Truchanda Bukida Ungamare something.
When you think about this meaning and you're studying and contemplation, and then you come to rest in the nature of your mind, relax in the nature of your mind, then there's not a whole lot of difference between the Rangtong and the Shentong views. There's not a whole there's no difference between the two. They are the same in essence. It is not just merely empty. It is not just merely clear. It is the union of the clarity and the emptiness. When we talk about the Rangtong, then the Rangtong is following the self-empty, is following the view in order to really understand that things are emptiness. And then when you study the Shentong, or the other empty, this is to come to understand that there is clarity. And so once we have listened to and contemplated those, and it'll help us develop our meditational experience. And there's really not a whole lot of room to mix things up here.
So, but are we actually getting glimpses of that when we're resting in that natural state?
That tombani gidende ngone tongina ste kapso.
Tati nyonyo yapujina tongkar.
If you're having good experience, yeah, it'll happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I want to go back a couple of days too to the excerpt you took from the Prayer in 7 Chapters by Padmasambhava. The 4th verse has a phrase in it, and the clear radiance between it. It's the purity of what seems to be perceived outside, the appearance of the object, the liberation of what seems to perceive from inside, the mind essence, and the clear radiance between, within the recognition of this. And could you speak a little bit about the clear radiance between? That would be helpful. Thank you.
Kasange ane Guru Rinpoche ge longde sodap le dumalaya de chitang de badu usal she de sik thamanala de tamro chitaru sungu yu nan dapata nandar jimbe semni drobata badu usal rango sheparu de dela badu usal she de guys
Partu sena chizung yul ta nanzambe senni ge partana la ze chizung yul ji noma te ta nanzambe senti tol tige tini ge partala tene te sarcha we salwate chizung yul mahimpa nanzambe sen mahimpa tige we salwe ngo te the rang nelu rela the rang ngo hibaro tati ngo hibahe tu som sonji tonji tuji teni to barsin ki lo selfinga
So here, when we say the clear radiance between is between the external object and the internal mind. And so the external object is purified. It has been purified. And the internal mind has been liberated. And so in between these two things, there is the clear aspect. This is the luminosity, the clear radiance of the mind. And that is not the external object. It is not the internal mind. It is the clear radiance. That is the way that our mind is. And so we need to recognize that. And so it is within the recognition of this, may the compassion of the Sugatas of the three times liberate the beings of those who are like me.
Rinpoche, I know that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche spoke of Khenpo Gangshar, and I wondered if you would be willing to share some stories of possibly you and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Khenpo Gangshar, or maybe just of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Thank you.
De la Trungpa Rinpoche ki Khenpo Gangshar ki kola te mambo sumare. Ya tene de Rinpoche ki chitan de ane Trungpa Rinpoche dan Khenpo Gangshar ki kola dan Rinpoche rani ki kola ane te sunaro na loju te sunaro na.
Ta loju debna tiga lo ta tende na mento loju mambo ta ki mixauge ya chi mandu ke ta te konamba pe la lo gendra ya bu ya ba tene te kona tudong ko to ba ya bu ngon ba tene ta tikap tana la ngarang jawe kap la konamba ni pe lama loma tege lomi gi lami gi jong lomi gi kuba si tene pe ya bu yore.
The stories are all written down in books. You can read them in the books. The stories are all written down so you can read them. So that I don't particularly have any more to say now. But really they had a wonderful connection between Khenpo Gangshar and Trungpa Rinpoche had a wonderful connection as Lama, as student, and they really Khenpo Gangshar was able to point out the meaning of meditation to Chogyam Trungpa very well. And so at the time that I met them, they were really a very good example of the Lama and the student, the Lama who was taking care of the student. This was really quite wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche, for your wonderful teachings and your presence with us. This is a question about choices. We've been given a lot of, many of us, different practices and received abhishekas. And on the Shambhala path, which has been so carefully laid out, we're encouraged to follow a certain sequence of practices. And I'm feeling so relieved to have these instructions, having just finished Vajrayana practice for many years, but have received the Vajrakalaya and Chakrasamvara Abhishekas with the intention at the time of doing those practices. But I'm feeling kind of lazy about entering into another big sadhana practice. And I'm wondering if I should feel guilty about that, or if it's okay, if it's okay to sort of maybe take a break without knowing if actually I will actually do those practices, or how strong is the samaya, I guess I'm asking, when you take an abhisheka like that?
Chitang de Nyaman Dramada Mambo Yore se Nemorangi Om Kashi Shubare Mixegi Shambhala gi Luxula de Mixegi Rimba Rimpetar ane Drogore se de kaso de Kachi de top me Mengante to top ne pe Missy Garson ne pe ane Karasa Uchung Drabo Johnson pe Yore se Morange tene doji pamogi nyamlan tsane tene ngoma ane demcho dan pube wong de so tobare ina intensan tes lelo drabo kiere stila chela shita dinayo mare tene morange de kola tes ane simple gyuba dang kyo rabo chegunas guilty rabo chegunas yana dine samshana digianas marang haku bundu pena onde so tobe kaso damsi yoro damsi de karesko tapo yana
다디 라 지당게 로마초 주 양답아 둡트바요 요래라 주 대점나 전주지 못도 봐요 요래 다디라 소수게 뭐바다 소수게 깔바레 드니 지당게 전주 야보신데 둡트나 안게당 버려 드니 대점 전주지 마tum 나야 대대세 갈레시니 랑기 주지 골라 효트바 주냐는 고조 토바데 베 칼바상보 더볼래라 데 담식 지당 요아레데 담식데 하자 쩨보는 버튼데 가요 말이라 데 체추 도토나 토바레 때마다 담식 영화도 그래서게 요 말이 하자 쩨르지 맞다 이 체버리셔요 데 쩨르지 토나는 칼바상보라
So there are a lot of students who are really able to practice the Dharma right, do everything really well. And then there are people who aren't able to be quite so diligent. And so we each have our own interests, we each have our own capabilities, and each have our own fortunes. So if you are someone who's able to be really extremely diligent, then that is first rate. But if you can't be quite so, and you need to do it, be a little bit slower about your practice, then you have entered the gate of the Dharma, you're doing practice, and this is really extremely fortunate to be able to do this. So, of course, there is samaya, there are commitments, but the commitments aren't all that fierce. They aren't all that strong, and so if you can keep them, that is very good. Of course, you take the commitments, it's good to keep them, but if you aren't able to keep them, then that's what happens. You aren't able to keep them. And so if you aren't able to be that diligent, that's how it is. But if you can be diligent, that's extremely fortunate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I have a question about your earlier teachings regarding looking for mind and body. If the mind does not dwell in our brains, then why is the mind affected when our brain is injured? For example, a brain tumor or Alzheimer's, which affects our ability to speak, feel, see, and hear.
Semde lula nebe korlaya, semde lula mayana, lebala kyun shona pena, lebala kyun shona ra. Delane semde and kyun shod dogras men kecha shemi tuba drabo, samotan tuba drabo, yongudu se. De semde lula yapara drabo, tegior base.
semte lulan terba yore la tene lulan terba yore la tene teacher na te sosu go ombo kasin ti get wa tanso soin korande tene ombo soso la penna me la jan hona zo mon ton cha gre ba tene me la jan hona ka hi zo mon ton cha gre ka hi zokni thong chagre khahi tene zok masalawa rabon thong chagre tene nawayam tekendure tene dal lepala tene namto mabon trogi yore namto tenzo hidwa toya meba chagi yore tene te namto toya da tenzo lepala tengi yore ba lepala tengi ojire.
There's a connection between the mind and the body. And because there is a connection between that, it's like there are the faculties for everything. There was a question about this the other day. There are the different faculties that we have. And like if the faculty of your eye is damaged, then you can't see, or maybe you see double, or maybe you see things unclearly. And it's the same with the faculty of your ears. And it's because of the faculty of the brain that we have a lot of thoughts. And when that's damaged, then you can't think as much. And so that is because it is supported by the brain.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche. I have a question that's come up in our practice, our evening practice. I have found I've had much more of a fresher, more profound experience during the protector practice in the evening, and it's stimulated a much more curiosity to know more about Mahakala and the Dharma protectors. And I was wondering if you could direct me to how I could or where I can learn more.
Gontaki chituna konsogi ane gompo testungo ane mada nuchidi tumbe house dilatene morana de pe sabo dan pe pendo chempo yimber ane sam ne digi kola tesi an jangres tene digi kola kawa ne jangres de kande jangres
Mahakala. Mahakala kani jangre.
Where do you live?
I live right around here. I live by the ocean.
Yeah.
Kani jangre sena. Gombo abinda boda. Tindi jang yabu mare. Gombo abinda boda. KTD nda boda. Tindi jang. Tini yabu yungura ba. Yomene tanda Kriston rona yabu yungura ba.
I get the feeling that I don't need to translate that. I think you got the main point.
I got a couple words in there.
Okay. Well, first Rinpoche said, Mahakala. So maybe if you go to a place like Khenpo Abbey, if you go to Khenpo Abbey, that would be good. Or you could go to KTD and study there. Or you could also go to Crestone, Colorado.
Rinpoche, taking sleep as the path in this teaching, you said to sleep in a state of undistracted naturalness. And so could you tell us what is the best way to ensure this will occur as you're getting ready to go to sleep at night?
The nilam kela ni mayingi mayimpa rambap su shagrwa. De tsema ni gonda nyedu la de tap gange de karesko de chegare tabo nyedu de gang chegare.
Ni misa kan che ko mare semain pa tang arang nyom nyom ko te ni yo na tini kali ni do de ni da nyom ni nyom do ndo to pa ndo le tang po pa la de si kali o jire de tini te yong ni yong to kam na tini rimbi le la ro ndo.
There's not anything particular that you need to do. It's just that you need to, when you lie down to go to sleep, you just need to let your mind rest within the experience that you have. And then resting in that, you'll begin to fall asleep, and then your sleep and the practice will mix. Now, for beginners, this is very difficult to do, but as you do it again and again and again, then it'll get easier and easier.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, has I become somewhat familiar with recognizing the mind or thought, and then resting in that to some extent. But I find it very difficult to just, in the kusulu resting meditation, to just rest in the nature of mind without something to get in, way to get into it. And as I rest, I find that it may be the word non-conceptuality which throws me off. I may have added something into the meaning of it, because it seems that my what I'm resting in seems a little bit dead, like that kind of dead emptiness that I'm resting in, and I have this sort of like back current that thoughts. I almost think like if I don't breathe, thoughts won't come or something like that. It's this. While I was doing that, all of a sudden I had this sword of Manjushri appear in front of me, and I thought non-conceptual, and now I've got swords, which. But then I dissolved it, and when I dissolved it, all of a sudden I did feel the that awake, luminous quality. But I realized that I had actually done a creation stage practice rather than the just resting practice. So my question basically is just, where am I going off on just resting?
공개 카카라드네 semgi nelote 아니 뭐 쉐게래 뭐 쉐네 데트 사보 용그레스인데 코마 카이 카보요레스인데 데나소 람박소 흐바데 아니 카이 카보요 용그레스인데 람박소 흐바데 데 흐바데 칸데나로 주그레스 페나 치단데 카카랑아스데다 믹메야나 톱메기 드라보 쉐레스인데 공개 데카소 아니 플루나 데 냠브라샤 나 데네테스 뱀동라보 차이라 뱀보라보 차이안에스 근데 지단데 난토 이오마레 이나 카카와 공기 토메야나 미메기 냠샤 삼베가서 카카와 공기 데라 탱치 데라니 라디라보치 잠베양게 라디라보치 아니 샤네 데 아니 팀송 팀네 공게드네 아니 semgi hlöne dena nyamra test shasonde pe sabo dan ani khane wara kyeres inende kerem rabo mara de mune chena dene ani kusula jogom marebes ne konge kawa dene kawa chosong kawa gosong
kolmasong chumasong yapu chongsong song dene 단다 뱀동 잔이 용 말에 뱀동 대코 뱀동 있는 데니 거 지야 매번 차거나 근데 로기요 말이
You didn't go wrong anywhere. You didn't go astray. It's good. That's not just dead emptiness. It's not really possible for you to go into emptiness. If it were a dead emptiness, then it would, or the inanimate emptiness, then it would just be nothingness, blank nothingness at all. And it's not. You can't go to there.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, could you speak a little bit more about taking afflictions on the path and the clarity? Is this? You said described the emptiness very well as a bubble dissolving. But what is clear is the clearness of the affliction, the clearness of the dissolving of the affliction, the radiance in between, or the clearness of the essence of mind.
Because Nyumon Lamkir Kasu de Sawa Shere, Sabore, Sabo Shebe Kasu de Rinpoche de la Tongchala and de Chuburabo Shene Chubura, Chunanga Bubura, de Denash de Pe Golaore, te Yinan de Yaldogoro, Yinan de Sawa de Gans, Pena de Nyumon Korangi Sawayana, Yan and de Nyumong de Timbe Kapsu, Yan de Simgirashing Wisalwa, Yan and Semni Salwa, Yana Skines.
Nyumong de Korangi pick up ni Tini Salwari. Nyumong de Truchala, Daisy, Nyumong Yore, the Yana Korang Nelula, Truchati Yomari. Muma said to Nyumong de Yomari. You mepa taking ote, Jim Mepa Revision, Jim Mepa Mari Salwari.
From the very moment that the afflictions arise, there is clarity. But there also is the confused part of it. That confused part is the affliction, but if you look at the way that it is, if you look at its nature, there is no confusion there. It's as if it's not there at all. But it not being, it's nothing. But that nothing is not blank nothingness, a complete and total nothingness. There is the clear aspect. So that's what it is.
Tini ta tanda ngarang ke hyuju la tanda ngarang chu gamba yosa tomun dujin la menkang ji jawi ware la menkang te pe ta chitang ge pentu chembore karire se na ti ge lumba ti ge mela tini menchu hiro togi yo mare la menchu hiro sie hige yo mare karire se na meje lekalandro ni lapala maje re na tini tel menchu maji bache tini re takpa ye pa thala ye pa chopa tindi ge tini tongbo ma chung je yo na tini te dawa mambo la lo ni ma cheru ro te troyo ma hi bache ta tinde ndabo chog yo re la tini ngaran zu menkong je yo na ti ge tenzo la te je me ja chenbo chik tu yo re sen yo si tu yo mare ti inna yo ma zo ma se anda boda me te anda boda tini ti ge chongse ja chenbo me mambo tenzo la pe pen to bo yung yo re la tini tel menkong je ja bare la tini menkong te la tanda John ge Dr. John ge ropa nangi wara la tini tela ya che nambala ropa na che nambige tela ropa nang tumkin tsuke tetse ropa nang na tini tingu ni trongsepa pemba tini ngaranzo trongsepa jangpa ma inba ngaranzo gyamba la ya tini tetse lobjung se nyamlin se tini sa emba la se pe kap la tini ti trava tini na ya jasalan ro menkang nang ro na kali yore tini sani korang rang la menchu je nang tup na tini lobjung sinking ki lobjung la yung negi yo ma re tini nyamlin sinking ki nyamlin la yung negi yo ma re tini tese du pento chenpo ngaranzo gyamba la yung yo re la tini trongsepa ja chenpo trongsepa chobo tini ta je jarsala yin na tene emchindrapo ta doctorndrapo mambu yore te yina yang chongse la te tsam chap tuki yo mare la tene te la men te se tre ju yo ba men ten ju la roramdrapo nang tu na pe pen to chenpo yung yore.
There's one other thing that I would like to say, and that is about the monastery at Namu Buddha, where there is a small medical clinic. This small medical clinic is really very beneficial. It's a very helpful clinic to have, and the reason is that it is in an area where there isn't a lot of medical treatment. The villagers don't have medical treatment. They don't have access to health care. And so if someone, for example, is going out to work in their fields and they get a cut on their arm, at first it's just a small cut. And so then they wrap it up, and they wrap it up with some filthy, disgusting cloth. And when they wrap it up with this filthy, disgusting cloth, then what at first is just a small wound, after several months gets to be larger and larger and larger. They don't know to wash it. They don't know to clean the wound in any way. And so for that reason, it's really helpful to have a small clinic there. Now, is this something that can do like major medical treatment? It's not that. But even though it is a place that's designed to do small medical treatments, having even this sort of a small clinic here, there is a really very big benefit for an area. It's something that it's a large area, there's a large population there, and they don't have any other places to go. And so that is why I have started a medical clinic at Namu Buddha. And now Dr. John Barnhill is giving a lot of help out with that. And so if any of you are also able to help out with this medical clinic, I'd encourage you also to help out if you can. And this is not something that is just going to help these villagers in a large area that doesn't have any medical clinic. It also helps at the monastery. The reason is that at the monastery there are a lot of monks who are doing meditation practice, they're doing their studies, and they're doing these in an isolated place. And it is a very good place to do your practice and study, but sometimes when you get sick, it's hard to go down to the city. And so if at that place there is a small medical clinic where all the people who are studying and practicing the Dharma can get the treatment, then getting sick is not something that's going to interfere with their studies. It's not going to interfere with their practice. And so it really is something that is a great benefit for the monastery and also for all the poor people who live in that area. If you're in the capital, in Kathmandu, in the capital, then there are a lot of doctors, but in the countryside, there aren't a lot of people. So if there's any way that you can help out, maybe by giving some medicine or giving some money, it would be really extremely helpful. Aren't we having a picture taken? I think we ought to have the picture taken. Or Rinpoche does, right? Yes, Rinpoche wants his picture taken. nuns should be closest to Rinpoche. All the top of it is a bit, you don't know. And everyone else come around.
Short enough?
Yeah, I think so. In the back.
Actually, I'll kneel. Kneel? Yeah, right here. Kneel. Kneeling. Really? I can sit on the edge. You go.
So some people can come directly in front. Okay.
Some people don't appear.
If you put people on the side, it's good if you can actually try
How do I turn it on?
Everybody say Ripa.
Now you have to get in the picture too. Turn that one on.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just doing it.
Come on, Gloria.
Gloria, you go sit up there. I'll take
Everyone's real so short. Where are you?
It's happening. All these flights.
have holes in my knees. That's empty.